Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Time slips continue to puzzle those who witness them, like a window to some kind of residual phenomenon, which can even be very interactive. Here are 3 of those strange experiences sent in by Weird World viewers. 1970s driver. Nick from Swansea in Wales in the UK had this strange and potentially dangerous encounter. He states that throughout the 1990s and into the early 2000s, he was a keen racing cyclist and spent around 15 hours a week on his bike, either training or in the summer months racing. One of his favourite training rides took him along the B242 between Aberdourlas and Glynneath in South Wales. He particularly enjoyed this road as it was usually peacefully quiet, having a dual carriageway running alongside it, which was taking all the traffic. There were only a few houses scattered along the road, including an old abandoned farmhouse, so seeing a car along there was a rare event. However, the road hadn't always been quiet, once forming a really busy link between 2 dual carriageways known as the Heads of the Valleys Road. Sadly, the road became one of the most treacherous in the whole of the UK, with all too frequent fatal accidents. Drivers were known to speed along the single carriageway as though they were still on the much better roads, taking risks to overtake slower moving traffic or misjudging one of the many tight bends. One evening, Nick was enjoying his solitary moments on the road, thinking about his next race and how best to prepare, when he sensed a vehicle behind him. He was cycling at a brisk 25 miles per hour or thereabouts, so gestured for the car to pass. But it didn't, remaining, as far as he could sense it, way too close for his liking. So Nick slowed and turned around to again gesture to get the driver to overtake him. He was met with the sight of what he assumed was a beautifully restored, bright yellow Audi from the early 1970s, being driven by a woman and with a child in the passenger seat. He could even see the registration plate dating the car to 1972. Nick turned again and made sure he made eye-to-eye contact with the driver. Once more, with good visibility ahead and no oncoming traffic, he politely gestured for her to overtake him, but still with no success. He could sense the car over his right shoulder for around 2 to 3 minutes, or almost a mile in distance along that road. He could by now hear the car's engine plainly getting louder as it got closer. In fear of being run off the road, he increased his speed slightly and turned again to now angrily remonstrate with the driver. But as he did, the engine noise stopped and he turned to see nothing. No car, no engine sound, nobody, just the once again deathly quiet, tree-lined, empty road. There were no houses or junctions on the stretch of road he was on, not even the old farmhouse at that stage, which was still some way off in the distance. He knew that there was nowhere for the car to just pull off the road into a lay-by, driveway or whatever. He therefore logically thought that the car must have either stopped or worse, veered off the road at some point. Hoping he could at least offer some help, Nick turned to retrace the last mile or so, expecting to see the Audi either broken down at the side of the road or even crashed and off the road. But there was no sign of any car, let alone a 30-year-old Audi. Nor was there any trace of possible damage to the roadside where it might have gone off the road. Nick cycled up and down the road for a good 10 minutes, retracing his journey, baffled but sure that the woman and child must have had an accident. But he never found any evidence, nothing. On getting home, he tried finding out if there had ever been an accident, fatal or otherwise, along that road involving a yellow Audi, but he found nothing. He also tried looking for old aerial photos of the area around the farmhouse to see if he could identify any vehicles there, but with no luck again. To this day, he has absolutely no idea what happened to him that evening, whether a time slip or ghostly car and occupants. One thing was certain, that it took him a long time before riding alone on that road again. The Hidden Room. Keith Macy reported that back in the 1960s, his mum Elsie got a job working for a company located close to the Tower of London. She used to walk there and have her lunch break in the grounds, and therefore got to know one of the beefeaters who look after the place so well. One day, while walking around inside the building, she entered a room with display cases which she had been into many times before, and now also saw a stone-arched doorway that had never been there before. The doorway showed a flight of stone steps leading down, but the odd thing to Elsie was that normally there would be crowds of other people around. She later said that she found it odd that approaching the room there was no one else around, or indeed inside the room itself. She found herself walking down the stone steps that wound around until she reached the bottom, where she entered a darkened room with no windows. She realised that it must be below ground level. Loose stones were on the slab floor and a big round metal grate in the centre of the floor. She kicked a stone into it and heard a splash, and so concluded that it was a well. She walked back out and returned to work, but the following week she met the beefeater and asked him about the new doorway in the room in the tower. She assumed that the stone steps leading down to the well had been uncovered because in that spot had always stood a large display case. Her beefeater friend simply said there was no new doorway. Elsie replied, "Don't be silly, I walked down there last week." Eventually he went with her into the same room, and sure enough, there was no stone archway in the wall, just the big display case standing in its usual spot. Looking behind it, the wall was solid stone, with even cobwebs and dust accumulated over some time behind it. It had obviously not been moved in years, but Elsie still insisted that she had walked through a stone archway there. Her memory could be trusted, as she knew the place very well, having walked around it so many times. The beefeater even remembered seeing her going in the direction of the tower on the day it had happened. They both wondered if this was a slip back in time to when there was a doorway there, which over the centuries since it was built has been covered up and forgotten. Perhaps one day the hidden steps and room will be rediscovered, and we will all know. Active ruins. John Wadsworth from Cumbria in England shared a bizarre experience which was reported by his father as occurring in 1992. Near where his father lives, there is a ruin of a medieval abbey called Furness Abbey, set in the countryside. John's dad would often walk his dog along the country lanes in the evening. Very late one night in winter, he was out in cold and foggy weather. He did his usual walk in extreme fog and, turning a corner, saw what appeared to be figures dressed in all white walking down the path along the river. They were wearing cloaks and tall white pointed hats. The figures at the front and back were both carrying lanterns. John's dad blinked in disbelief of what he was seeing as the men proceeded down the path. It then occurred to him that the tarmac of the lane had changed to dirt, and the hedgerows were suddenly a lot tidier. He found himself quickening his pace towards the abbey, and was there shocked to see the ruin now intact in the fog. This building had been destroyed in the 16th century, and so it was absolutely amazing to see it whole, as well as the glow of a candle or lantern through its now magnificent stained glass windows. John's dad related that he seemed to have stepped back into a past existence. Eerily, another white figure was staring at him. At that point he realised what was happening and ran down the lane in the other direction. He was relieved to find a very modern-day Ford Escort driving towards him with its headlights beaming into the road. The driver slowed down and asked him what was wrong, and he said he was just out on a jog, so as not to seem crazy. He had had a brain operation after a tumour diagnosis the year before, and later spoke about this encounter with his doctor. He was told not to be alarmed as it was most likely a side effect of his medication. However, the experience seemed so real that he remained convinced, particularly as many other people have reported strange sightings around that area. Many visitors have spotted the figures of monks wandering the grounds and ruins of Furness Abbey, one of whom repeatedly walks slowly towards the gatehouse before disappearing into a wall. That same monk is also seen ascending the remains of a stone staircase. Another hooded man on horseback, sometimes headless, has also been observed riding at speed. The figure of the White Lady is literally the most hair-raising, and she may have been who was staring at John's father. She has also been snapped. She is thought to be some kind of guardian spirit watching over treasures rumoured to still be buried beneath the abbey. She only appears at night, and evening visitors to the ruins are warned to stay out of the belfry tower for fear of the White Lady slamming shut the iron door, trapping them inside. One sightseer in the late 1970s reported the translucent White Lady walking alongside him for several minutes. The man's hair stood straight up in fear, and he avoided the location in future. From time slips to paranormal beings, very active and interactive ruins.